Hello, I'm here to talk about my alter ego, Auntie Kate, who helps me describe my family and village history. You may have heard her earlier in this event talking about Sticklepath School. If not, you might like to listen to that first. Kezia Ching was the sort of great-grandaunt that most genealogists can only dream about. Living from 1860 to 1933, she leaves a great paper trail behind her. She was a bit of a hoarder, keeping photographs, memorial cards, and all sorts of lovely documents. I do hope that you may go away with a few ideas on how you can make the most of your own skills, interests, strengths, and experiences to bring your own research to life. I would encourage you to make notes, perhaps in the event workbook, and pause the video a couple of times to really think about how you might stamp your own character on the way you present your history research. I started thinking about family history back in 2016, and increasingly my question was, how can I pass my findings on in an interesting way? What can I add? In 2018, I did a Pharos online course with Janet Few, Writing and Telling Your Family History, and two things came out of that. Firstly, an article for Devon Family History Society magazine describing a walk through Sticklepath. Sticklepath was my ancestors' village for about 200 years and my village too. Writing a short article for your local history journal or newsletter, preferably with an image, is a great way to share your research. Secondly, I began to realise that what I was interested in was the village and its inhabitants more generally, and so I discovered the delights and deep rabbit holes of one-place studies. When I registered my study with the Society, I was asked if I would lead a webinar about my village. It was about a year away, so I agreed. Enough about me. Who was Auntie Kate? Kate was my grandmother's aunt and then stepmother, and so I have information from my grandmother Muriel, a few minutes from a poor quality video, plus about 4 sides of handwritten notes giving me some information about Auntie Kate, but mainly about the village and other villagers at a time when Auntie Kate was alive. So how did I come to create my alter ego, Auntie Kate? Well, when the time came to do that webinar about my village in October 2021, I had a real attack of imposter syndrome. I didn't think I had anything interesting to say. I was fairly new to genealogy in any sort of serious way, and also, I like those little everyday facts, and those mostly come from secondary sources, which, well, proper genealogists might not think that much of. So Auntie Kate gave me the courage to talk about everyday life, to present those snippets in a hopefully engaging and entertaining way. It does help that I don't mind making a bit of a fool of myself. In a moment, I'm going to suggest that you pause the video and spend a few moments thinking. I wonder if you have any particular ancestors that you identify with or that you've developed a character for, or perhaps you feel you have more than an average understanding of. Auntie Kate has rather got under my skin. I guess the equivalent if I was writing a story is that I would write as her rather than about her. You might choose a local character rather than an ancestor who could observe and comment on local people. For example, a school teacher, a shopkeeper, or an inn landlord. I have done a little amateur dramatics a long time ago as a student, and I gave presentations in my work life, and bringing those skills to genealogy and making the most of the types of information that I have, I brought Auntie Kate to life. Now, if I could make quilts or do embroidery, I might bring those into my stories, or even make an heirloom. Or if I was a whiz at decorating cakes, I could celebrate ancestors' birthdays with my family and hopefully enthuse them. Our life experiences too influence our research. I was brought up in a Methodist household, and so the importance of religion to our ancestors comes naturally to me. And as a retired GP, I have an interest in illness and disease, death and disability. I also worked in Malawi for 2 years, and so I bring some practical experiences of what it's like not to have electricity or water in your house, what it is when the harvest is bad and you have months of hunger to look forward to, and of children going to school after 3 hours of doing chores with little or no breakfast, and so on. So just think about yourself. What unique combination do you bring to family and local history? The way I think of a presentation on Zoom, for example, is really about a one-to-one conversation rather than a lecture. You're telling a story to a friend sat just behind the camera. Your research, the facts form the framework. A timeline is very helpful for the storyteller and those around, and it helps ensure historical accuracy. Regards the accent, I replay those few minutes of my grandmother's video and listen to some Devon oral histories. Writing in an accent is tricky. You might describe the accent. He spoke with a thick Devonshire burr, and you might use some local slang words or turns of phrase, ensuring their meaning is clear in the context. You can get ideas from dialect groups on Facebook and so on. Make sure that any similes, metaphors and colloquialisms would have been in use at that time. And consider how to deal with words and phrases that might not be acceptable today. You may wish to give a warning message beforehand for language or for life events that might cause distress. Use those secondary sources, any local diaries, newspaper articles, local booklets and so on. Local events can really add colour, and think about national stories that might have an impact too. Small details from our lived experience or from contemporary descriptions often help the listener feel present in that place. And think about all the senses too, smells, sounds, etc. Now, storytelling, we all have our own style in daily life and possibly exaggerate or present the facts in a particular way so as to have a bit of a punchline. This blurring of fact and fiction is challenging for many historians, and it doesn't suit everyone or every setting. However, dry facts alone don't engage many of our family members. I try to make clear what is fact and what is I suppose or perhaps might have been. Adding rhetorical questions can help too. How do you think Mum felt when Ray Kelly fell into the water tank at school? It helps to engage the listener and feels more personal. These days, of course, the school would be blamed, but then probably the child alone would have been in trouble. You can use images to evoke your imagination when writing. If you don't have a photo of your ancestor, a photo or portrait from a similar time can help you think about their clothes, their hair, even their character. Images of tools and, of course, of that place can similarly add depth to your descriptions. Copyright of images is a problem, of course, for presentations. You can create images. For example, the Society of Genealogists has many examples of memorial cards. You could create one in the style and of the time and place, or perhaps, having looked at them, you could use their examples to discuss how you would choose one in your story. And of course, if you can, use your own artwork and cartoons, that would be fantastic. You should know your audience and what they might be interested in. Of course, as a member of the audience, ask yourself, what do you find are the most interesting ways of presenting? What's been the most engaging stories you've heard? And which are most memorable and why? Can you replicate that? If I mention a person more than once, I try to find a way to remind the listener who they are, either something about their occupation or use a little phrase, my niece, the pretty one, for example, to remind the listener who they are. The internet has opened up so many opportunities to see talks online, but there are challenges of presenting on video. Gestures particularly are very limited, especially if you're in a tiny frame next to a PowerPoint image. Practice any gestures in advance to make sure they show and that they work. You often need to channel more energy into your voice. Try to bring that kind of vibrancy and excitement that you might convey by movement and facial expression in person. This does feel very unnatural when you start. Now, I have a confession. The character I portray is not really Auntie Kate. She was a quiet soul who would do anything for anyone. But that doesn't come across so well as a reenactment. So the character I play is based more on my grandmother's turn of phrase and a little old lady from my childhood in the village. At less than 5 foot tall, quite round and very bandy-legged, which I suspect was from rickets as a child, Gertie Harvey was quite a storyteller. Well, gossip, some would say. The sort of person who chatters away and you can hardly get a word in edgeways. And I suppose being a slightly larger-than-life character allows me to exaggerate facial movements, changes in pitch, pace and volume, giving that extra bit of energy to the talk. So, my final challenge to you is to think about how you might present your own research in a new and different way. Perhaps stop now and write a short piece in character. And do consider offering a short article to your local family history society or local history society. Could you develop an alter ego and use them to present your research, perhaps just for your family on YouTube, for example? Whatever you decide, have fun.